Hello.
Hello. Is it me you're looking for? Tell me how to win your heart.
Hello from the other side.
Oh, that's good. I didn't think about that.
Yeah,
What's
nice.
another hello song? Hello, darkness, my old friend. What's another hello song?
Hello, hello.
I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello. Hello, hello. What else? What else? What else is another hello song? Hello, and welcome to another edition of Footnotes. Today, I'm joined with Pastor Brady and Pastor Justin, misogynistic, chauvinist male pigs. And we're talking today about why men are needed in the church. What a way to start, right, guys?
That's right.
I just thought I'd get it out there, say it, because you know somebody listening is thinking it, and they're going to say, you guys are just men. What about the women? But our subject today is we need men in church. It's not that we don't have men in church. We do. But we want to encourage men who are in church. We want to encourage them to continue in church. And we want to encourage male leadership in the church. So our focus today is just men. Men. It's raining men. You ever heard that song?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And as
Those are not the type of men we're talking about.
And as we are recording this, it is raining.
But hopefully not men.
Not men, but it's Hurricane Beryl or Farrell or somebody.
Yeah, Francis.
Is it
Francine.
Francis?
I think it's Francis.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's going on. You can hear it all around us. You can't, but we can. So anyway, it's raining rain, not men. So let's talk about men, guys. Number one, you're men. So I feel like we have a particular professional ability to speak about this.
Yeah, we have the inside track, right? This applies to us as well.
Yes. Brady, what do you think? Are you a man?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Timothy? He's shaking his head. All right. Well, let's do it like this. Let's talk about men. I alliterated. I said coming, connecting, caring, but we said something else because we said, that sounds too feminine.
Leading, commanding.
Yeah, we need men.
Coming, connected,
We
and
need
then
men
leading.
coming, we need men connected, and we need men leading, but since we couldn't figure out a C, we said co-leading. All right, so those are our three. That's our outline. Coming, connected, and co-leading. All right, so let's talk about number one. We need men coming to church. Now, we have a lot of great men that come to church, so we want to go ahead and say that. We want to give all the disclaimers, right? This is not void in Vermont and Massachusetts and all those things. You know, play responsibly. Please don't blah, 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 blah. We want to give all those disclaimers. We have good, godly, older men and younger men that are coming to church. We have good deacons that are men. We have good men pastors like yourselves. So we have men coming to church, but traditionally, church has been a place where men may be present, but they may be either mentally absent or physically absent. David Murrow, years ago, I'm talking 2006, wrote a book called Why Men Hate Coming to Church. I read the book. I was very intrigued by it. Murrow cites a lot of data and says, yeah, traditionally right now in the church age that we're in, men don't come to church as much as women do. So his point, you know, he says, look at the church. If the women all left tomorrow, what would happen? The church would shut down. If the men all left tomorrow, the church would go on as usual. Why? Because the women are leading, the women are coming. When you have one spouse attending church bringing the kids, it's typically the mom, it's not the dad. Now, I realize somebody out there is going to say, that's not true. We know, but this is what Murrow cited. Typically, it's, you know, the female bringing the grandkids, the female bringing the kids. That's a wonderful thing. Nobody's saying that's bad. But the men aren't doing it. And so kind of the first area to start is every church, not just Broadway, but every church needs godly men. So let's talk about that. Why?
Well, I think number one, we see throughout the Bible that God uses godly men to accomplish his purposes. Certainly that's true on the more microscopic level with the family, but that's true also as we look in the Old Testament at how he used godly men to really lead Israel through tough times, to call them back to repent when the nation was not going the right way. We see godly men being used in the New Testament, and even now in our church, the way that the Bible structures leadership, God uses and chooses to use godly men to accomplish his purposes. And that doesn't mean he doesn't use women, and that doesn't mean that women don't have an honored and respected place in the church. But without godly men, we are not going to be able to structure our churches and our families in a way that brings God glory according to his plan. So we need men involved in order to accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish as a church.
Not only does the Bible lay that out, and that's according to God's design, but even data backs it up. I remember Lifeway did a study that a few years ago, and it talked about, the families coming to church, and if the kids come to church, it was like a 3% chance or a 5% chance that the rest of the family would come. So reaching the kids, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the mom and the dad or the family's going to come. Then it was like if you have the mom attending church, it was like maybe a 50% chance that the whole family would follow the mom and come to church. But if you get the man of the family, like the dad, the husband, to come to church, it was like in the 90s. I can't remember if it was 93%, 95% of the chance like the rest of the family will follow the dad's lead. They will come to church. And so even that just shows you the influence of a man and his family, right? If we were able to reach men and they would get on fire for Christ, right, the whole family comes and follows his leadership, where it doesn't necessarily follow with the rest of the family. And that backs up with Scripture that the man is supposed to, right, lead his wife, lead his children, and so that makes perfect sense. That's the biblical model.
Yeah, I feel like, and you could probably even tell as we opened the show, I feel like culture wants to make us apologize for being men and for asking for male leadership. Well, that's chauvinistic, What about all the women who serve in the church? Well, it's true, they do, and they do a tremendous job, and we're so thankful for them. But we need men to come to church. And for all the reasons you're saying, the data, the biblical model and example, we need male leadership. Now, what Murrow pointed out in his book is that churches, and I don't know if I would agree with this, but it's certainly intriguing to me. He says, now this was a long time ago, early 2000s, but the reason men weren't coming to church was because the church was feminized in every way. Down from the music, Jesus was talked about like a boyfriend, in the praise music, Jesus, you're my boyfriend, or whatever. And, so men don't like singing boyfriend songs. Now, again, this is Murrow. You can disagree with it. Or he said, even in the way we decorate, it's feminine. I mean, I know a lot of the rural churches, it's like flowers from your grandma's attic have exploded all over the baptistry and the communion table. And then, you come to other churches and it's seafoam green, which is a very calming, peaceful, feminine type color. Now, I don't know what Murrow would have said the color should be to attract men, but this is his observation. Even the way we decorate, it was kind of feminine. Our songs are feminine. Our idea of programs, he said, were feminine. Men like projects, not programs. And, you come to this program and it's ordered and they just kind of sit there and they don't do anything and they need some object. So all of these things he mentioned in this book, and he said this is why men hate coming to church and why it's seen as a female thing. So in some churches, the little boy will come to church with grandma or mother, but then when he grows up and he's old enough, he's not going to come because dad's not coming, and he sees that as a very feminine thing as well. Oh, Sunday school's feminine. Church, feminine. I'm going to be a man, so I'm going to be like my dad who never came and never attended, and that's what I'm going to do too. I think all those observations were really interesting. and true. He's the one who said, take the women out of the church, it falls apart. Take the men out, you're not going to notice. Because men, they may come, but they may not be really present. You know, they're not leading, they're not working, they're not serving. So the adage there is we need men to come to church. And more than just showing up, right? We need them to lead. We need them to be masculine, unashamedly masculine. It's not wrong to biblically be a man that God has called you to be. Our men are reading Masculine Mandate, a book right now that's in our book nook. And he says in the opening chapters, God gave Adam 2 commands, to work and keep. Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. So man's responsibility in the garden was to work, and to work for the Lord, to work for his family, to work the garden, and he was to protect it, to keep it. And these are the 2 mandates that men have now, work and keep. So this is what we need men to do. Do we see them doing that in the church as a whole? What do you think? Are they coming?
Well, you know, I'm encouraged. I would say at Broadway we do have men that are coming, as opposed to maybe some other churches that I've been a part of and served at in the past. You know, maybe it's depending on who you are. You might have a different opinion on, are the men doing more than just showing up? Are they showing up just to be here? Are they being involved? I think we do have a lot of different programs and projects that men can get involved in that hopefully will translate to them staying involved. But we have to understand that it's okay for men to be men, and there's a difference between men and women. And when we create that artificial equality that we see in our culture, that everyone is exactly the same, men and women are exactly the same, then we really ignore that godly creation, that God created people as male and female. There's a distinction. We shouldn't try to treat everyone exactly the same. And when we do, just like any other artificial equality, we drag men kind of down from their role and drag women down from their role, and no one really accomplishes what they're supposed to. So we have to create a place. Are men coming to Broadway? Yes, I think they are, but we have to encourage the church as a whole and those men to be manly. Don't show up and think you have to be something else. And now that doesn't mean you're supposed to sit in the sanctuary and smoke cigars and cuss, because that's not what biblical manhood is.
Because that's what Brady does.
Right. We had to ask Brady to stop that when we hired him. But, you know, that we have to understand, what is biblical manhood? What does it mean to lead? What does it mean to keep? What does it mean to protect? What does it mean to live a life in boldness as a man? And then create opportunities for our men that are coming to actually satisfy that hopefully godly desire they have.
So when we say we want men to come, we don't want you to just attend. We want you to be active, not passive. I feel like when it comes to spiritual matters, many men are present, but they are passive spiritually. Case in point, from my own experience, 9 times out of 10, I think there's only been 1 or 2 cases when I'm doing premarital counseling with a couple, and I get to the session where I'm talking about the need for worship in the family, leading your family. I'll ask the question, which one of you, the man or the woman, is the spiritual leader in this relationship right now? 9 times out of 10, the man will say, she is. She is. I even had a guy tell me this week, he said he's looking for a wife. And he said, you know, I just hope my next wife can be a spiritual leader. And I corrected him. I said, no, you're to be the spiritual leader. That's what God's called you to do as a husband, to work and keep, Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. And if you ever get there, as a father. So I think there's this idea among a lot of men, I'll come to church, but I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to be passive, and I'm going to let my wife be the passionate one in worship. I'm going to let my wife be the passionate one in her relationship with Christ, and I'm going to let my wife be the passionate one driving our children to be faithful in church. And I think when we do that, we're not really doing what God's called us to do in attending and being a part of a local church. God honors the women. We respect the women. We're thankful for them. But I'm going to say this. My goal is to make our church more masculine. Now, that's not to say there's not a place for the feminine, there is. There's not that's not to say there's not a respect for the feminine. There is, but it needs to be masculine. It needs to be a place as well where men come and they're not just passive. Men are passive by nature, I think. I'll confess my own passivity. I'm willing to let my wife deal with the kids, and I'm sitting right there, right? And so there's a problem, and we're both in the room. Let's say this is fictitious. This is just a rhetorical example, whatever. But, we're sitting in the room. This has happened all my life. And I'm willing to just sit there and let her deal with it. And sometimes she's had to say, will you please help? Why? Because every man can relate to that story if they're honest. Because we tend to default sinfully to passivity. Mm-hmm. It's just like Adam in the garden, right? If you look at the Hebrew in Genesis chapter 3, the word you is plural. So a lot of Hebrew scholars will say it wasn't just Eve standing there talking to the serpent. They were both standing there. Adam said nothing while the serpent tempted Eve, because again, the you, when the serpent says, you will have your eyes open and you will be like gods, he's plurally in the Hebrew saying you both, you all, y'all. Okay, so if that's true, and then you go to the New Testament, and what passage is it in the New Testament? It's Timothy, I think. And I think it's 2 Timothy, where it says, and Adam sinned, and because of his sin, the race was plunged. Come on, look it up, Timothy. Look it up. Because of Adam's sin, and it blames Adam. It never in the New Testament mentions Eve. Now, the theory on that is that the reason why it mentions Adam in the New Testament and puts the responsibility on him, going back to Genesis 3, is because, A, he was there. He was standing right there, but he was doing what every man does. He was being passive, and he wasn't speaking up and protecting his wife and working and keeping the creation that God had called him to do. Now, different scholars vary on that. Did you find it yet, Timothy? What is it? We're getting close. He's praying about it. Don't be a passive man, Timothy. Search the scriptures.
Well, while he's looking, that is interesting, because I've heard someone say something similar, that in a vacuum where you have a man and a woman, if a woman asserts herself, the man will almost naturally fall back and let the woman continue to assert herself. When we see that curse in Genesis 3, that the woman's desire will be over her husband, and then kind of this, again, this ungodly type of authoritarian leadership. Maybe the husband will be dominating the woman, and I'm paraphrasing, not using the exact language there. So, we have to be careful, both as men and women. Men, are we falling back and just letting our women steamroll us and take and usurp an authority that maybe they shouldn't be taking, a leadership position they shouldn't be taking? Women, are you actively submitting and performing your role as a godly woman in the church and your family? Because it's so easy, whether you're talking about Adam and Eve or you're talking about even in our own lives, to see that get out of balance.
Yeah, what's interesting is most of us men, we have more ambition when it comes to our physical jobs. We see, well, I need to work.
Or our hobbies.
Or
we
our
have
hobbies.
more ambition.
Yeah, we're ambitious. We take leadership and initiative. Like, I got to provide and protect for my family physically. But then when it comes to spiritual matters, are we providing and protecting our family spiritually? We're just absent, right?
Yeah.
We're just, well, the wife can do that. The church can do that. But, like, we don't do that at work. We're like, well, I got to get a promotion. I need to work hard on this project. I need to take the initiative and lead my team. But when we go home, we sit down, turn on TV, and we don't lead our family. And so it's like there's this disconnect where it's easy to focus on the physical. And most men would say, even unbelievers in the country would say, well, you need to take care of your family and put food on the table. But providing for them spiritually, leading them to church, leading them in family worship, praying with your wife, those things we just kind of let fall by the wayside. And, well, the wife can do that or someone else can take care of that. And so it's interesting how we're ambitious in one area, but then in other parts of our life we're totally passive.
Yeah, absolutely. I found the verse, 1 Timothy 2:14. It's also Romans 5. So Romans 5 kind of blames Adam. But Paul makes a subtle distinction, And he says that Eve was the one deceived, not Adam. Why was Adam not deceived? Because he had been given the commands of God. He knew what God had said. His wife did not. He was standing there. He was culpable, right? So he willingly allowed her to walk. If you agree with that theory, he willingly allowed her to walk into sin. He did not work and he did not keep. He was passive. We're still struggling with that as men today. Passive with leadership in the home, as you said, passive in spiritual leadership. So again, you go back to the premarital counseling. Which one of you is the spiritual leader? Oh, she is. So the challenge that I always make to these men is, well, then you're going to have to buck up and you're going to have to become the spiritual leader. And a lot of times when I say this to these guys, it's very uncomfortable because in the relationship that they've been in, they've never been the one spiritually out front. In their own relationship with Christ, devotionally, they're not as serious as she is. In their own devotion, to the sermon, the scripture, the singing, they're not as serious as she is. And so they know, oh my goodness, now this weight's been put on me. But you've got to be more than passive. You've got to just, come and be a man who is, I don't know. We said we want you to come. I don't like that because it's almost too passive, isn't it? We want you to just be here. No, I mean, we do.
But it's an active participation in your coming.
We want you to command. There we go.
That's right. Command, the respect that you should. Command the presence that you're supposed to have. Not just filling a pew, but being here and being actively present.
Yeah.
Fully present and taking initiative, not just sitting, right?
When my wife said this when our kids were little, she said, I really want you, anytime our kids don't want to go to church, I'm going to send them to you. And I would really appreciate it if you, as the father, would explain why we're going to stay in church and be in church as a family. And I always appreciated that. And there were several times when the kids were little, one of them would say, I don't want to go to church today. And she'd say, well, go talk to your dad. And I knew, because we had already discussed this. I remember one time in particular, Micah, he was probably 7 years old, 5 or 6, somewhere in there. And he said, well, Dad, my friends at school, they don't go to church. So-and-so, the neighbor, doesn't go to church. Why do we have to go every Sunday? And I said, well, number one, we go because Mom and Dad love the Lord, and we're going to go to church. And as long as you live in this house, whether you're 48 or whether you're 4, as long as you live in this house and I'm paying for your bills, you're going with us to church. That's the rule. Now, you don't have to live here at some point. You can make your own decision. But as long as you're here, that's what you're going to do. And I said, secondly, I'm the pastor. And so I'm going, and you're my children, and you're going, and we're not going to argue about that. And you know what? It only took one discussion with our children, maybe at various times in their life. That one discussion, it's not up for debate. This is not an argument. We are going. That's it. They've never asked again. They understand this is the way it is. I wonder how many dads do that, or how many moms have to be the one to say, well, honey, do we want to go to church today? Well, should we? Well, I don't know, man. I played golf yesterday. It's been a long day, and we were all at team sports yesterday. I don't know. We probably need a day off, at least an hour off before we're back at team sports. So, mom has to beg the husband, honey, should we go? That shouldn't even be a question for the wife. No. The husband should say, I'm going to be the one to lead us to be at church this Sunday.
Well, and again, if your kid came and started a new job and said, Dad, I just don't feel like going to work today, you'd be like, you need to buck up and go to your work and go take care of your responsibilities, right? If you say, I don't want to go to practice today, you need to go to practice. You made a commitment to be part of the sports team. But then when it comes to spiritual matters, again, all of a sudden now it's up for debate. And you don't need to go to Sunday school or youth group or, go to church today. It's like the physical responsibilities we're much more on top of things. And you need to take care of your body. You need to go to work. But then when it comes to spiritual matters, we just, it doesn't matter. Don't go. And so it's just that, that devilish thing where we care more about the physical matters than the spiritual matters, and we take more initiative and have more expectations of men culturally, physically, than we do spiritually. And so then we just fall into that same pattern where we're just very passive when it comes to leading our family spiritually, but we wouldn't be that way with their education or their sports or their job. We'd be like, you have to do this. It's not even a question. But then when it comes to church, well, what do you want to do? But you didn't ask them about that with their math homework or their whatever else responsibilities. But then spiritually, we just kind of cave and crumble. And so that's one area as men we need to say, okay, am I leading my family spiritually? What does that look like? There's expectations, just like I have expectations for you in your sports or your homework. There's spiritual expectations I have for you. And so I think so many of us, that's where we are weak in that area.
All right. So someone listening who says, well, you guys are just insensitive, misogynistic pigs, chauvinist. What about the single mom who's doing all that she can? What about grandma who's keeping it together? Well, of course, we would say, yes, we applaud you, we love you. But what would we say to those people who say, well, I don't have a male leader? You're calling men to be leaders. It's not wrong for us to do that. We need to call these men to be leaders. Maybe some of them will listen and go, yeah, I'm a little bit too passive. I need to be more aggressive spiritually. But what hope would we give to a single mom or, a grandmother trying to bring the kids or whatever? Because we don't want to make them feel like, oh, well, what do I do?
Well, I would say they should have the same hope that someone like I had coming to church that didn't have any examples of what godly parents looked like. I mean, my parents did not go to church when I started going, when I became a Christian, when I was saved. I didn't have that example. I didn't have an example of what does it look like to be a godly husband? What does it look like to be a godly parent? But there were men in the church that I was able to gain that example from, that discipled me. Even though I couldn't go to my own family and get that discipleship, the church really raised me in that area. And Jamie would say the same thing from her side as a godly wife and a godly mom. And so I would say to those women, that are single mothers, that are grandmothers, that are really have a responsibility on their shoulders that they shouldn't have to bear, but they're bearing it. Number one, thank you for doing that. But number two, look to the church and the men in the church. Why should we step up and lead our own families? Because we're not leading only our families. We're also setting that manly example and godly example for every other boy that may show up, every other little girl that may show up, if this is what it looks like to be a godly man and to be involved. And so I would say that's even more reason to get your kids in the church, get them involved so that they can find that godly discipleship from other men.
Yeah. So there's going to be examples. Number two, if you're the single mom or the grandmother, set the example for that young man that you're bringing to church. Maybe even have a discussion with them and say, look, I know your dad doesn't come to church, or it's just me. But when you're a husband and you're a father, please do what you saw me do. Do what I modeled and what you saw in the church.
Right. And we say, Paul says the same thing to Timothy, right? When he uses his mother and his grandmother as examples of they raised you in the Holy Scriptures. And so, the women should be able to see themselves as setting that example as well.
Yeah. So don't give up if you don't have a man in your life or there's not a man, in your family. You're still doing a good thing. Press toward the standard.
Yeah, well, and I would concur exactly what you said, Justin. Lean into the church and call other men to help, right? We should, spiritual maturity. I remember Champ Thornton said this a couple years ago in the Parent Equip conference, and I've never forgotten it. He said, spiritual maturity is moving towards people and problems with wisdom and love. So the more mature we become as men, the more we're not just caring about ourselves or our family, but our church, those around us. And so if we notice, hey, that boy comes to church and I never see his family, I never see his parents, or, maybe we invite him to join us and our family as we go camping or we go do something, go to the youth mission trip and be intentional with those who we know maybe have broken homes and aren't getting, as much spiritual leadership from their natural family. And so we as people in the church should look out for those people who are potentially, at risk for being kind of spiritually neglected, so to speak, and we can pour into them. And so it's, it's our responsibility as church members to look out for one another and say, hey, how can I help this single mom? How can I help this grandma? She's trying to pour into her grandkids. And so that's, as men, we should be looking for those people and saying, hey, can I have him join us to go to the ball game or do this or that, and take that initiative. Don't just wait until someone says, could you please help pour into this guy? Like, we should be looking for those people actively and saying, hey, I'd like to invite them to come over to do this or that. And so that's kind of on us as men in the church to look out for those who are weak and need help.
There you go. Awesome. So let's move on to pump number 2.
Pump it up. Here we go.
Pump it up. Let's before we do, let's think about songs with the word pump in it. Pump up the jam. Pump up the jam. What else?
Oh man, that's tough.
Can you think of anything?
Pump Up the Jam's the only one.
That's the only one I was thinking of.
Timothy, can you think of any songs? No. Okay.
I don't know.
Well, there you go. Before the show, we came up with all these. We came up with the word hello. And did you record that, Timothy? You should run that at some point. We came up with all the words that were in hello in songs, right? So I was just trying to continue the tradition.
Right.
But you failed.
We did. Pump
You
up the jam.
misogynistic pigs. I love calling you that, by the way.
We're changing the name of the podcast.
Misogynistic pigs. All right. So number 2, we want men to come, coming, leading, being aggressive spiritually, but we also want men to connect in the church. And I feel like this is an area where men are also very lacking, is connection. We were talking about this the other day with our women in the office, and they were discussing how they know a number of women widows, but they don't know a lot of men widows, and that often in their experience, if a man dies, the wife tends to live a long life after that death, but if a woman dies, the man really has a harder time with that and may not live as long. Okay, so that was their observation. I said to them, well, it's interesting because I remember studying this in psychology and sociology. Women, one of the theories of why women live longer than men, and that's proven, they do live longer than men, is several factors. One is huge. They are more connected in life than men are. So women will just call other women and they'll say, hey, I was just calling to check on you. But when was the last time as a man you had another man say, hey, I was just thinking about you? I mean, wouldn't that be weird if I called one of you and I said, hey, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? Now, when a man calls another man, it's for a purpose. It is a specific purpose. There is no, I just was thinking about you and wondered what you were doing. It's, hey, do you have that thing ready? Or, hey, do you know where that is? Or, hey, I was wondering, I couldn't remember. Help me remember. A man calls another man with a mission. A woman calls another woman for connection. Okay, so that was one example. Another example, women more connected in life than men. Women will say, I'm going to go to the restroom. So say you're at a restaurant. It's you, Justin, and me, and maybe it's our wives. You can come too, Brady. You can bring Lauren. And so maybe we're all sitting there at a restaurant, theoretically, and one of the ladies says, I'm going to go to the restroom, and the other two say, oh, me too. Okay, come on, let's go together. And they all get up and they go together. Now, if they come back and sit down and I say, I'm going to the restroom, and Justin, you say, oh, I'm going to come with you, that would be weird, right? And then Brady says, me too, let's all go to the restroom together. Now, that's a funny example, but women are comfortable in relationships, so you see the bonding that they're easily able to do in simple things like, oh, yeah, let's all go to the restroom together. Men don't do that. Women tend to have longer relationships, friend-wise, over a long period of time. Men are like, yeah, we moved and I just forgot I ever lived there, right? And so there's got to be kind of a reason. There's got to be a purpose. So the sociologists tell us that this is why women live longer. This is a theory, of course, why women live longer than men, because women are more connected in relationships than men are. Men are connected around an event, sports or a team or a hobby. Women don't have to have any of that to be connected to another lady. They just have to be willing to hang out, talk, go get coffee, whatever. Maybe that's changed a little bit in our culture over the last few decades, but I think men don't connect with other men as well. So when a man loses his primary best friend, his wife, he has no other connections. You see what I'm saying? He's lost his friendships over the years. You know, he doesn't have anybody he can kind of spill his heart out to. And so what does he do? Right? He's lost. But a woman, not so. She kind of has this network of other ladies, and they get together and they go travel and they do all this kind of stuff. And she's like, you know what? I loved my husband, but this is pretty good too. It's just the truth.
Well, I think the depth of the relationships are different too. I can think of, so my wife and I, we have some friends that when the wives talk, when Jamie and this other wife will talk, they'll discuss things on a very different level. And, you know, these are the things that are going on in our home. Here's some of our struggles. Here's what we're dealing with. And maybe some of those things are struggles that the husband's having. And then me and the husband could hang out. And I know this because Jamie's told me about this conversation. I know this is going on. But me and the husband might hang out, and it never come up. Well, what did he say about that? Well, I don't know. He didn't say anything, so I didn't ask him. You know?
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, my wife always wants details about it. I was like, I have no idea. I don't know. I wouldn't have even thought to have asked that.
And so, you know, it's very different. I would say naturally. Now we can intentionally ask and check in, but it's hard. I think about all the time. You know, people where that I was friends with in different places where we've lived, and think, oh, I should check on so and so, and then don't, because I can't think of a legitimate reason to call that wouldn't sound weird. Like you said, like, hey, Josh, I haven't talked to you in a while. Okay.
No,
and then that would be the end of it.
I have that problem now. I've got several friends back in Texas, and I can tell I'm bothering them. And they don't mean to be that way, but I call one of them, and I'm like, I just want to talk. I just miss you. But I can't say that. And so I can tell I'm bothering him. Don't bother him. He's busy. And then when I do call, I'm really busy. Can I call you later? You know, and then it's, hey, what do you need? I'm like, I don't need anything. I just checking in. How's the family? How's things going? And so, yeah, it is weird for men, but we've got to break through that barrier to some degree. We don't want to lose our masculinity, but at the same time, we've got to have friendship. You know, Christ had friendship. I call you my friends. Mm-hmm. Jonathan and David had friendship. We've got to develop that with people and somehow try to keep it going. Connection. In the church, men are not nearly as connected as women. Women fellowship. They see each other, you know, all that. They get together, do whatever. Do men do that?
I read somewhere, and I can't remember where this is from, but it said women connect face to face and men connect shoulder to shoulder. And so I feel like, and I think I agree with that. Like you said earlier, I think men connect while they're doing something else, whether that's cheering for a sports team or working at the job site together or accomplishing a mission together. It's almost like there's got to be something else that you're doing with them. It's not just sitting in a room staring at each other's faces, bearing each other's souls per se. That's not usually how men connect as well. And so I feel like in the church, I mean, serving, doing something, going on mission trips, doing things with other men, where it's not necessarily just sitting in a room crying and bearing your deepest, darkest secrets, but it's you get to know guys by serving together. Like, go on the mission trip, go, you know, teach a class, go do something, you know, where you have that space to kind of get to know each other, but it's not so threatening as men where we're just kind of sitting in a circle and talking about our feelings. It's like you kind of do that, but it's doing something else while you're talking about it.
Yeah, it's almost like that comes up not passively, but it comes up more naturally when we're not trying to drag it out of one another.
Mm-hmm.
When we're both swinging a hammer, but we might talk about all kinds of problems, and here's the things that I'm dealing with, and here are my struggles, here are my dreams, here are this and that. But if I asked you, Brady, hey, what are your dreams? You'd be like, dude, get away from me. This is weird. This is a weird conversation.
But with a hammer in your hand, it's like, oh, I've been thinking about this, and it's just funny.
Yeah, it's no big deal at all. And so thinking about that, that's a great, I love that observation. And we shouldn't let culture hijack male friendships. And I think that's something that's really a weird phenomenon too. It's fine for women to be best friends and go on these girls trips and all this kind of stuff. But if two men or a group of men have a friendship, then it gets called into question in some kind of weird way, because culture doesn't allow men to have strong bonded friendships like a Jonathan and David. I mean, there are these weird liberal scholars who will say, well, there must have been more going on there, and try to read between the lines and all this. No, maybe they just had a deep, strong relationship with one another in a biblical sense. And so, we should strive for that as men.
Yeah. And so in the church, let's bring this back to, we want men coming to church, being active, not passive. We want men connected in the church. So more than just sitting on a pew, we want you to get connected with other men. What does that look like? I mean, there needs to be accountability. There needs to be sometimes confession. There needs to be friendship, right? Biblical friendship with other men. And if you don't have that in a church, that can be a really bad experience. You just feel like you're coming and you're sitting. So how do we encourage accountability and friendship and all those things to connect men? What could men do in the church to be connected?
I think one way we're trying to facilitate that is at our discipleship groups. I mean, where we have men gather around the scripture, right, and holding each other accountable and getting to spend enough time with each other. We actually get to hear people, what's going on in your life for real, more than just the, hey, I'm good, hey, how are you, and the passing we see on a Sunday morning, but giving that time to gather around the Word. So we're not just there to talk about our feelings. We're there to read Scripture, to study the Scriptures. So we have a purpose. We're there for the Scriptures. But while we're talking about the Bible, we also share prayer requests and talk about what's going on in our life and get to be real with one another. So I think that's one way we can really, are you part of a D group? I think that's one great way to get better connected with other men in the church.
Okay, so that's one good tangible thing. What else?
I'd say another way is to find places to serve. There are no lack of opportunities to serve in the church, and whether that is greeting or driving a golf cart or helping to serve coffee and donuts, or maybe getting plugged into a specific ministry. I think about, being a part of the youth ministry. I'm so blessed to see these young godly men really come in and take the reins in Sunday school on Wednesday nights. But as that's happened, we've seen substantial growth in our young high school guys. That's one of the largest groups we have right now. And so with that growth, we need more men that are serving in those areas. And that's always going to be a need that we have, that as we continue to grow, we're going to need more leaders in those areas. So find places like that to serve, whether it's security, greeters, youth, children, choir. I mean, the men are vastly outnumbered. And so if you can carry a tune at all anywhere, come show up for that. There are plenty of places to serve in the church.
Those are good tangible options. I would say, too, intentionally reach out. I mean, what if a couple of guys said, without a program, we're just going to meet together, once a month for lunch, just talk, just hang out, That's a manly thing. You got to eat. You got to eat, right?
That's right.
So
I do.
It's good. So do that maybe. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I'm always telling my wife, let's find a couple and try to get together. That's so hard in the season of life that we're in with 4 kiddos, because we feel like everything revolves around them going somewhere. It's not us, it's them. But, we'll teeter out and it'll level off at some point. And, we want to reach out and just try to get to know people. That's so important. So we want you connected, right?
Well, I even think of like Sterling Cooper and Terry Wildman, right? So they saw this idea of ministering to the people at Culpeper Place, and I've just seen even their friendship and their bond as they serve in a creative way. So maybe there's something that doesn't exist right now that God puts on your heart, that I could serve the community in this way, or me and some guys could do this and fix some people's broken down house for some widows, or there, again, it doesn't have to be a program. It just, is there a need that you and some other men can go meet? And while you do that and meet that need, you're going to bond with one another and say, hey, we fixed that problem for that person. We did it together. And now I, feel closer to you. Like, we did that together. We accomplished the mission together. And so I think so many of us were just kind of sitting on the sideline, but we need just someone to take the initiative, and it may be us, to say, hey, how about you and me go fix that problem over there that we see? And as we do that, we feel connected as men. Like, we did accomplish the mission together, not by ourselves, but as one. And so I would just be creative. Again, at our work, we're like, what can I do to be promoted? What project do I need to do? But then when it comes to the church, we're not looking for, we should maybe look for projects. We should, and maybe they're people, maybe they're, different problems, but we should have that same drive to say, okay, what can I do? How can I use my skills with other men to do something and make a difference?
Yeah, be creative. I like that. I think about in my life, a man reached out and said, hey, you're fat and you're overweight and you need to get in shape. And so he said, I'll meet you at the gym. And so William and I celebrated. He didn't really say you're fat, just like you're really not a misogynistic pig. But he said, hey, you need to, you need to do this for your health. And you help me pastorally every week. And you teach me good things. I want to help you. And so I used to be a health trainer, and I'm a physical therapist. I want to help you. So let's meet at the gym. And so we just celebrated 2 full years of going to the gym, pretty much, okay, I'll say 4 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, we take Wednesday off. Thursday, Friday, I usually run on Wednesday. But we have celebrated 2 full years of doing that. And the friendship has developed. We're lifting weights. He's lifting weights. I'm lifting the barbell. But lifting weights, and we tried to get the manliest man we knew, who just walked in the studio, Carl Sukraj, to come with us.
But he said there weren't enough
Carl,
weights. It was
you
too
came
light.
one time, and we thought you were going to join us for 2 years.
In my heart, I'm there with you guys because apparently my feet don't allow me to have the comfort of lifting weights or running. So I tried it. I hurt myself.
I will wheel you around.
After you get hurt a few times, you realize that, hey, you're just plumb out of shape and you just can't do nothing about it.
Yeah.
So,
well, we were excited. Carl said, I'm going to join you guys. So he came. We were like, all right, now it's going to be 3 of us. Yeah. And we've tried to invite other guys, but people won't take us up on the invite. So you're invited.
well, I think if there were donuts there, you'd have more people.
Well, we've prayed about it, but yeah, right now it's blood sugar low. That's our goal. So yeah, you can do all kinds of things within the church to try to connect with other men, and all of these are good examples. So let's go to the last thing, lead, or since we got to have a C, co-lead. We want men, to come and be active. We want them to connect within the body of Christ, and we want them to co-lead. So I think we've talked about leadership, but how could we encourage men to think more deeply about taking the lead, within the local church?
Well, I would say first, just showing the importance and maybe the lack of an awareness of the lack of leadership there is from a masculine perspective. Two ways that I think of that immediately, as we had a youth pastor search early on a few years ago, and then right now we're currently in the middle of the worship pastor search. We've heard from people all over the nation is that there's a vast shortage just pastorally, across the United States. It doesn't mean we haven't received any good resumes or anything like that, but when we see that, we think, okay, well, what are we doing as a church? What are we doing as a body to promote that type of leadership? And I know that's a very specifically defined calling, that we're not calling every man to step up and try to become a pastor, but obviously pastors are men, and so that's indicative of maybe a larger problem of what are we doing to create leaders in the church. So there is certainly a need. We're not just saying, oh, come be a leader because we want you to be, or because we want a specific role filled. There are really tangible needs for men to lead, and there's a shortage just across the church overall. that has to be met. So I would say that first. There really is a need. We're not just saying, hey, come lead because that we needed a third point. There really is a need for male leadership.
Yeah, that's a good point. We start with the pastors. So, something we've been able to develop over the last few years here is an internship program for guys. And Justin, you went through that. Jackson went through it. Did Timothy go through it?
He didn't want to read all the books.
And we've raised these guys up within the church that now serve in leadership within the church. And that was intentional. So now, I've met with you before, Timothy, right? We had lunch and I talked, how can I pour into you and help you become the man that God wants you to be in the church? And I've met with Jackson and I've said the same thing. What can I do to help you? And, we don't know what God's will is, but, I've said, look, one day, I'm going to be gone and you guys are much younger than me. You're in your 20s. And, if the Lord tarries and leaves you here, maybe you'll be leading in some pastoral role, but we want to look ahead and we want to say, okay, we were raising up male leadership. We're not waiting on it. Hope it works out. We're raising up male leadership and we're trying to invest. So that's a good point. Lead in the pastoral way. And I think that's a church's responsibility. Brady, I know you meet with guys and disciple them through books of deep theology, and you're raising up a bunch of young men in that respect that are becoming deacons and becoming leaders within the church. And a lot of these guys that we are pulling from have been in our D groups. We've seen them grow. So, we added some new deacons, specifically Stephen and Will. And we've seen them come along. They're young men, and that's exciting to see that leadership that's emerging. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, as the church grows spiritually and numerically, there's always going to be a need for more Sunday school teachers, more deacons, more, pastors, more. And so where are they going to come from? We've got to be discipling people, right? And that's what God commands us to do. So if we're just going to be obedient to the Great Commission and pour into other people spiritually, raise them up, well, that's going to be the next leaders. But we've got to be doing that or there will be no leaders to pick from, right? And not everyone can just teach a Sunday school. You've got to be a mature Christian who knows the Bible, who can rightly teach and divide the word. And so again, it's not just do you have a pulse and are you a Christian, but it's are you mature? Do you know the word? Can you lead other people? And so that takes investment and time to make people ready for those kind of responsibilities. So we've got to be working on that now or we won't have anyone to draw from.
Yeah, a church can't wait. Oh, we've got a vacuum of male leadership. Well, what were you doing way back here to promote that and push that and provide for that? So, yeah, very true. And we're seeing that across the board. I think about Jody, who has become a member and gotten on fire and been discipled through, first of all, our discipleship group, and then we helped get him a job. I say we helped get him a job. Bobby walked into Chick-fil-A one day after our men's group meeting, Carl, and I said, hey, Bobby, I want you to meet my friend who needs a job. And it was okay, well, ironically, the guy who did this just quit. So come down and fill out paperwork. And he did. And I've been told Jody's now one of the best guys who does whatever Jody does at that company. And they love him. And he's been promoted. And I'm like, praise God, right? He's doing his work as unto the Lord. So Jody now can't come to our men's group, so he started coming to yours, Brady, and we've raised him up and said, look, we need a Sunday school teacher. And, this young, I say young, he's my age, 50 years old. He's a 50-year-old guy, but he's like, I'm ready. I'm wanting to do this. Yeah. That's the way it ought to be, right?
I think one of the main problems that we see is, at least for what I see, is the desire for walking with God is not there like it used to be, because our society has just normalized worldly things. Whether we're running into the glamour of business, the businesses side of the world, how much money can I make, and they've quenched what God is really calling them to do. And at least that's what I think.
Yeah.
In some
so
sense.
There's a lack of men going into the ministry because it's not a money maker. It's not glamorous. It's very stressful. People don't understand that. Emotionally stressful. Chris George used to tell me, he was a nurse practitioner?
Yeah, that's right.
And he was also a pastor. He's a friend of Justin and I thank Chris because Chris got you to come here.
That's right.
When I moved here. So thank you, Chris George, Baldy Spice. He'll never listen to this, but that's our joke. We were the Spice. Well, I'll just stop right there. He was Baldy Spice. But anyway, Chris used to tell me, he'd say, when I'm taking blood pressure, man, I'm calm, I'm happy. When I'm in the office at the church dealing with problems, it's stressful. He said, I've done both jobs, and he said it's easier to me to do nurse practitioner than it is to do pastoring. He was just stressed with the emotional stress. People don't get that because you're dealing with problems every day, and you guys know this, and our young guys are seeing it. You deal with some very heavy problems, and then you deal with a lot of petty problems. I mean, silly stuff. And you're just like, what am I doing? But that's it. That's what you got to do. You got to clean the stalls of the sheep, and that's what you're dealing with. So, yeah, that's very true. Leadership, what are some other ways? I think we've kind of covered it all. But anything else you'd say to men who aren't going into the ministry? We're trying to raise up leadership. But is there anything they could do proactively?
Well, I would say one thing. If you are a leader, if you're a man listening to this and you're a leader, look for other men that can come under you that you can pour into. I think of guys like William Whittington, which before we had a division between Daniel Hart's class and this new young professional college-age class, he would come in and we asked him and gave him opportunities to teach periodically, which hopefully gave him more confidence to step out into that lead role. A guy like Brandon Boozer, who now William Whittington is pouring into and is coming in and kind of filling some of those spots in a Sunday school role. And it doesn't have to be Sunday school. Find a ministry, or if you're a part of a ministry, find someone to come under you. I think about the deacons and the way we have other deacons that are coming on board, shadowing some of the established deacons. There are plenty of places to serve. So if you're in leadership, find someone that you can take under your wing and disciple in that particular area. And if you're not, look at men that are serving and step out, be a man and gird up your loins and go talk to them and say, hey, I want to help in this area too. And hopefully those men in those areas will understand that, oh, now I have an opportunity that has landed in my lap where I can pour into this guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hopefully. Oh, go ahead. You want to say?
I would just say one last plea. I mean, there's a lot of talk about, depression and, men not being satisfied with things. And even though it's hard to lead and to serve, that's what we're made for. And that's where joy is found, right? There's nothing more joyful than being a man and doing what God's called you to do and taking on responsibility, taking initiative, serving others, dying to yourself, sacrificing yourself in many different ways for the good of others brings true joy. And so instead of sitting and being passive, right, you're never going to be happy. If we're being passive on the sidelines, that's not a life well lived, right? And so it's not just hard and responsible. It's joy is found. Doing what God has called you to do as men, that's go after it. Like, get in the game and you will be, the joy of Christ will be yours.
Yeah. So on that note, we've talked about male leadership, male bonding, male activity. And Carl has come to be a friend of mine today. We're going to go to lunch together, right?
Are we only friends today?
No, and we're gonna pour our hearts out to one another, right, Carl?
Over a Big Mac.
We will pour some water on each other.
Yeah, especially with Hurricane Carl coming in right now. You can hear it. I mean, it is coming in. So on that note, I've thought of more man songs, right? What a man, what a man, what a mighty fine man. Remember that one?
I do.
What a man, what a man, what a... Carl, can you think of any songs with the word man in it? How about this one? I say the measure of a man for him.
The man in the mirror?
Oh. Man in the mirror. Way to go, Brady. What else?
Right. Apparently, I don't listen to a lot of songs.
The only song that is in my mind right now is we're men in tights, tights. We roam around the forest looking for fights. You don't remember that? Robin Hood Men in Tights?
I guess we didn't
Yes.
see that movie.
Yeah, all right.
Well, on that note, we better go before we fall into sin and the roof caves in due to the hurricane that's pounding on us right now. On that note, thank you, women and men.